Welcome to Counterpoints. We always say that we have an amazing show today. We really have
Brian
an
is so
show.
excited.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in the world.
Gold cards.
Yes, you can buy, if you have $5 billion, don't blow it because you can buy an American citizenship
Soon.
for it, according to Trump. Yeah.
Coming soon.
All right, coming soon to a location near you.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to start with news that actually House Republicans passed a budget resolution last night. We're going to walk everyone through exactly how they got there and what it means, what it could mean for Medicaid, what it could mean for all kinds of stuff. So that's going to be up first. Then we have lots of updates from Doge, as is the case every single day. We learn more about what Doge is up to. Sometimes these reports are conflicting, but we are going to get to the bottom of the last 24 hours in Doge world. Trump also introduced, as we just teased, a quite interesting idea about $5 million gold cards that could replace visas. And Ryan has some reporting to share from DropSite on the bombing in Syria that just took place over the course of the last 24 hours.
Yeah, Israel launched an air assault over Damascus and its surrounding areas, because why not?
That's and you had just on the ground. Murtaza was on the ground, right?
Yeah, we had him on the show last week. He had just returned from Syria. Yeah. We filed a dispatch last night with Ali Yunus. We're also going to talk about Ukraine agreeing that, okay, you know what? After all, we will sign a deal around rare earth minerals and exploitation of our oil and gas in our ports. They removed we're going to take $500 billion of it. So good negotiation from Zelensky. That's a pretty big sticking point. $500 billion sticking point.
Yeah, well, it's
still no security
nothing.
Guarantees. We've got Steve Bannon comments about what Trump should do with that minerals deal as well that we'll get to. And meanwhile, prosecutors are being rather shy in how they approach a domestic violence case where a Republican member of Congress was, according to police reports, bruised up his not wife but girlfriend who lives here in D.C. And she is now deciding not to press charges, although there's so much evidence that it seems like they really should be able to press charges. The police were able to see the bruises.
It's pretty odd.
Which is, that's at least like, hey, you're coming with us type of evidence.
Yep. But yeah, so we'll go into the sordid details of that story as everything we know about it, because it's kind of an interesting story about Ed Martin, who is in the news, very much so in the news, for saying that he sees himself as the president's attorney, as DC.
Yes, he's the U.S. attorney for DC.
Yeah.
And he's about as radical a figure that has probably ever been in a job like that.
He's hardcore MAGA.
He is hardcore MAGA. He claims he was not in the Capitol, right, on January 6th, but he was there and has made his bones as the defender of the hostages, as Trump calls them, and is now just on a complete rampage, except against Republican congressmen who may have beaten their girlfriends.
Yeah, we'll see. We will dive into all of that. And man, do we have a Good Friday show. I'm very sorry. I unfortunately have to miss it because I have to get on a flight, but Ryan booked Rohit Chopra. Yeah,
Rohit Chopra, the former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and a former FTC commissioner. He kind of paved the way for the Lena Khan and Andrew Ferguson bipartisan anti-monopoly wing to take power in the FTC. Then he went over to the CFPB. Then he was ousted. He's going to respond to all of the various charges that he's gotten over the last several months. Jamie Dimon called him an arrogant POS, I believe, or arrogant SOB. Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Andreessen. He has all the right enemies, and he has them all very angry. So we're going to ask him why, and see if he can defend himself against these defamations.
Super interesting. Ryan's going to pass a couple of my questions on, so I'm excited to watch and hear how it goes. Let's start with our A block, which is that the House of Representatives passed a budget resolution last night. This is going to go through the reconciliation process, to keep using this ridiculous parliamentary language. We can put the first element up on the screen. This is the vote total. Look at that razor-thin margin. The vote was 217 to 215. The one and only Thomas Massie, American hero, in my opinion, was the only Republican to vote no, not because Thomas Massie had any issue with the proposed tweaks to Medicaid, of course, but because it adds to the debt. And Thomas Massie is a hawk on that and is always ideologically consistent. Now, what's interesting is that there were 3 Republicans throughout the day yesterday who said they were absolutely no's. Yeah. Mike Johnson was able to flip 2 of them, Warren Davidson.
With the help of Trump.
With the help of Trump, Warren Davidson and Victoria Spartz. So now this bill heads over to the Senate, where it will have to obviously deal with some of the same concerns about Medicaid. Someone like Susan Collins is not going to be particularly excited to have to vote for what we can get into this in just a moment. What many on the left will say amount to cuts to Medicaid, and the right will say is we don't know the particulars of how they'll get to these cuts yet, but basically they'll try to add work requirements and all kinds of different things in all likelihood.
And not to be the well actually guy, and we'll roll Massie in 1 second.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite go to the Senate yet.
Oh, no.
If you guys want to buckle up for
no.
a little parliamentary lesson, get out your number 2 pencils because this will be on the test. So the way that this absurd process works is the House floor votes on a budget resolution which sets the outlines for what each committee is supposed to then produce. So it'll say, hey, you Ways and Means Committee, you do taxes. We want you to cut $4.5 trillion in taxes over the next 10 years. Education Committee, we want you to cut this. Over here in the Health Committee, we want you to cut this much Medicaid, et cetera. Like they just give a flat line. They don't tell them how to do it. They say just do it. Then the committees all meet and they pass their individual pieces. Mm-hmm. Then the Budget Committee reconciles all of that into one place. Then they send that back to the House floor, and then they vote yes or no on that, and then they kick it over to the Senate. And so the Senate is undergoing its own process of reconciliation as well. The difference being they are not dealing with that $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. They're trying to only do the spending cuts. And that's why you keep seeing Trump saying that he wants one big, beautiful bill. Mm-hmm. And what he means by that is that he wants the tax cuts and the spending cuts all done together. Now, Massie, the reason he's a no on this is that you might have noticed that the numbers, 4.5 trillion in spending, in tax cuts, and what was it, 1.5 or 2.5? It's all made up. So It doesn't really matter what these numbers are because these are projected out over 10 years and involve these projections that nobody takes seriously.
1.5, yeah.
Yeah, 1.5. So they're saying so they're even in their rosiest scenario, they're saying that they're going to cut $1.5 trillion in spending. Don't worry, only bad things, waste, fraud, and abuse, not the things that you like. And then they're going to do 4.5 trillion in tax cuts. So here's Thomas Massie explaining why he voted no on this.
Can you just talk to us? Are you still a no? Is there anything?
They convinced me in there. I'm a no.
Is there anything?
Look let me their own numbers. If the Republican plan passes under the rosiest assumptions, which aren't even true, we're going to add $328 billion to the deficit this year. We're going to add $295 billion to the deficit the year after that, and $242 billion to the deficit after that, under the rosiest assumptions. Why would I vote for that?
So are you solidly a no?
Yeah, they convinced me. I was a lean no until this meeting. Now I'm a no.
This no confirmed
This is
you
a
no.
no.
All right, so Emily, what am I missing? That's a very persuasive argument from the right.
Yeah, I mean, the only possible rebuttal to that from the right is that if this is your stance, you literally can't vote for anything. Yeah. Because you will just not get anything done.
Which he doesn't.
Yeah, right, he doesn't, which is perfectly consistent. So, yeah, I mean, if you won't, I mean, it's obviously a sliding scale of like horribles, but basically if that's your ideological position, you're consistent in it, to your point.
The counter argument is, come on, bro.
Yeah, the counter argument is, really?
Come on, we got to do something, bro.
Yeah, you got to do something. But that actually is the counter argument. That's literally the counter argument that you'll get from people like Mike Johnson, who used to be sort of Freedom Caucus adjacent, like Massie's Freedom Caucus adjacent. But those guys obviously now face looking at this huge addition, as Massie pointed out. Let's take a look at how Democrats are reacting, particularly to what's been going on Medicaid-wise. This is AOC. Let's roll A3.
There's a fundamental math problem here.
there is a constant reiteration of waste, fraud, and abuse. Sure, that's great. What is the identified amount of waste that this committee has identified? Because what the order that's been sent down here is find $880 billion. Not there is $880 billion of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's find $880 billion. And so we have not heard a single concrete number of the amount of waste that's been identified. We have not heard a single concrete number on the amount of abuse that's been identified. And there's just kind of this vague magic wand around waste, to my colleague from California's point. And waste is being used as a very large word here, because what's being suggested is that long-term care is wasteful in America, that children's health insurance is wasteful in America, that poor people seeing the doctor is a waste, that all of these people are disposable, that the elderly are disposable. So I think the problem here is that the numbers don't add up, and anyone who votes on this budget this week is voting to cut Medicaid in America and voting to gut healthcare for Medicare recipients in America. There's just no other way around it. And with that, I yield back.
So that's obviously a temperature check from the left flank. Let's tune into the center left flank. Here's Hakeem Jeffries.
Children will be devastated. Families will be devastated. People with disabilities will be devastated. Seniors will be devastated. Hospitals will be devastated. Nursing homes will be devastated. So let me be clear, House Democrats will not provide a single vote to this reckless Republican budget. Not one. Not one. Not one. They will not get a single Democratic vote. Why? Because we're voting with the American people. We're voting with the American people.
So, Ryan, what's really interesting about that is this Republican resolution, as it heads through the reconciliation process, has a really easy giveaway to Democrats in terms of like political unity when it comes to Medicaid. And Republicans are really bad at explaining, quote, waste, fraud, and abuse as not, like pushing back on the allegation that that's a cut as opposed to reform. They're really bad at making that case. Like with Medicaid, the media isn't being super helpful here, but if you dig into what they say they're going to do, it is more like cutting down on, they say it's like waste, fraud, and abuse, but if you look at it, say, okay, so you want to add work requirements and all of that, and we can disagree with it, but the word cuts, they should at least be like smart enough to try to find a workaround politically, to try and find a workaround to that, but they don't.
Yeah, and I'll give you my theory on why I think they can't do it, and it's because they don't like the program.
Yes, fundamentally, yes.
And in a lot of cases, they don't like the people on the program. And in fact, Steve Bannon on his show had to remind his audience and Republican lawmakers with them that there are MAGAs, as he says. There are MAGAs on Medicaid. Implicit in that.
He said a lot.
Yeah.
And that's right.
Implicit in that is it's just not those poor Democrats that you think about, poor black Democrats that you think about. Like in your head, when you think about, when a Republican's thinking about Medicaid, and a lot of people think about Medicaid, that's what they think about. So he's telling them, okay, if that's what you think about, I understand why you want to cut it, but it's not just them. It's also MAGAs that are on it. So you start from that premise, that they don't actually like the program, and they don't like the people who are on the program. So the way that they want to cut the program is to reduce the number of people that get the program. And the way they do that is they throw up a bunch of paperwork requirements and also this work requirement, which would say you have to work 20 hours in order to get Medicaid. And if you can't find work, you basically have to come to some community center and sit there on a computer or something, and just wasting your time so that they can feel good about making you feel bad about getting the assistance that they're giving you. And so they tried this in Georgia, and they spent like $70 million on this like pilot program, and it ended up just having 6,500 people in it. So it costs an enormous amount of money to set up these projects and programs to monitor all of these people. and then you don't actually, you're spending enormous amounts of money per individual, when it would be so much easier to just say, hey, if you're under this threshold, you get this money. Now, the other way that you could cut spending on this program is to go after the businesses and the scam artists that are ripping it off. There is an enormous amount of waste in Medicaid and Medicare.
It's one of them in the Senate, isn't it?
On that front, one of the guys in the Senate, Rick Scott from Florida, ran the largest Medicare scam in American history. And the way you do a Medicare scam or a Medicaid scam is, like I heard recently about a Medicaid one in New York where people were saying, like dentists will do these, others will like say, we'll give you a toaster for free if you will come in and sign a piece of paper that says I pulled your tooth or whatever, and then I submit this. You could invest money in inspectors and probably AI at this point, analyzing the different payment schemes and finding this fraud and targeting it and prosecuting it and going after it. I think the reason that Republicans won't do that is it would make the program work better. And as I said in the beginning, they don't like the program. What that would do is it would solidify it, and it would make people feel better about the program, and so they would support it more. But there is indeed, you could, so it's $880 billion that they're trying to cut over 10 years. I think you could actually do that without hurting individual people, but you would have to stand up a serious program of investigation. Hey, guess what? There's like 150,000 federal workers who are well-trained that were just fired. You could go hire them to do that at pennies. Just continuing to pay their salaries. Actually, a lot of them are on administrative leave now or unemployment, so we're paying them anyway. We're just paying them not to work. So pay them, put them to work, go find the fraud. It was much easier to do Medicare and Medicaid fraud, before we have the technology that we do now. Like if you're some like South Florida like scam operation and you've stolen a bunch of Medicare numbers that you can find online, what they do is they steal these numbers, they pretend that they sold wheelchairs to them, they charge $7,000 for 100,000 wheelchairs, they cash the check, move the money, shut down, and then start up a new thing and do it again. I'm not a technologist, but it's gotta be pretty easy to figure out how to make somebody prove that you actually did sell and have something to do with making wheelchairs or selling wheelchairs. Like, did you do it or not? Scooters is the big one.
It's very sad how like these grifts are so convenient for the political establishment. Like this is also part of the reason. It's part of the reason. And it's part of the reason why Democrats are hesitant to like be super, like to take a scalpel to Medicaid too, is that there's all kinds of people who benefit from the system. The people who benefit least are the people who need
small
it.
Business owners.
Yes, exactly. The people who obviously need it most. And so as long as you have the inertia where the system feels like it's working well enough and people aren't rioting in the streets, then you end up with just like the worst system ever.
Right, because Democrats are unwilling to go after it because then they'll get accused of cutting Medicaid. In fact, in Obamacare, one of the good things that Obamacare did was cut Medicare Advantage, which is this privatized version of Medicare, which is absolutely rife with scams. And so they went in and said, we're going to pull out some of the BS profit from Medicare Advantage, which is a good thing to do for everybody except the scammers who are making that fake profit. And they spent the next 10 years with Republicans complaining that they cut Medicare.
It's amazing, right?
It's like, wait a minute, what?
But on the other hand, so this is the problem, is like Republicans will say, like to AOC's point where she's saying they don't like, this is poor people are disposable, elderly people are disposable. The principled ideological conservative response to that is actually they end up paying more for worse care. That's what the actual conservative argument is. And if you believe that, you also don't have many incentives to come up with a better solution, which is what we've seen for the past 10 plus years of the Republican Party after the repeal and replace era, where there was nothing ever to repeal and replace with because Republicans couldn't agree on anything. There's just no incentives to either go fully, there's no good way to operate a system that aligns with the Republican Party's donor-aligned incentives. And it's like, sadly, the worst possible. I mean, if you look at studies on happiness, like they've gone into indigenous communities that have barely been touched by technology and found that one of the constants, two things that keep people happy: community, like knowing that you have family around you and friends around you, and health. So if you feel like you have your health covered, if you feel comfortable with that, which most people in this country don't, like 1 in 5 people are actually on Medicaid in this country. It's a very, very high number, and I'm sure it's a lot higher in some really deep red states. That's extremely precarious. It's not comfortable. It's very nerve-wracking, and the people who make these policies don't understand that.
Yeah, and so if you noticed when you had your number 2 pencil out and I was explaining this process, obviously none of this is going to get done by March 14th, which is the deadline for the government shutdown, but that's actually a separate track just to add a layer
That's right.
of complexity to this. So you've probably heard the news talking a lot about, hey, March 14th, if they don't pass a budget by March 14th, then the government shuts down. That actually is not related to what happened last night. What happened last night is setting the kind of the 10-year projections and the spending and tax policy for 10 years going forward, basically 2026 on. So on a separate track, they're pushing forward with what they're trying to do with these budget cuts to actually kind of codify the Doge cuts, which is what I think they should do. Like you're going to do this, you
Do it Congress.
do it the right way, do it through Congress. Who knows what they'll be able to cobble together. The Republicans, you tell me, seem to be signaling quietly, okay, we're going to do a CR, which is a continuing resolution. Like we're going to complain between now and March 14th. We're going to say we're not going to do a CR. We're going to denigrate the entire idea of doing a CR. And then when we've tried everything else on March 13th at 11:59 p.m., we're going to do a CR, which is a continuing resolution, which continues spending levels at a set level. Basically, I think they'll do it through September 30th. And then Russ Vought, Elon Musk, and the others are going to take that amount of spending, and what they're signaling privately and somewhat publicly is that they see that as a ceiling. So don't worry that it's a big number and you feel like you've been betrayed again. We're not going to spend all that money. We're going to impound a bunch of it. We're going to ask for rescissions from Congress, but the impounded part will then draw lawsuits, and it will go to the Supreme Court, and they think that that's when they'll get their chance to say that it is actually legal, contrary to the Impoundment Act, for the president to impound congressional spending, and then that will
Overturn potentially the Impoundment Act.
Exactly, overturn it, and then solidify this unitary executive theory that they've been trying to put into practice. So that, and then they go back by September 30th. By then, they hope they'll have passed their reconciliation tax bill. Right? Is that what we can expect, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a pretty good sketch of what will actually end up happening here. Also the mentality with the one bill versus two bills, and Mike Johnson won that out. Obviously, he won that battle. Right, so far, right. John Thune wanted to do two bills instead of just one big, beautiful reconciliation bill. Part of the thinking was that you'd be able to put a lot more of the tough stuff in the first bill with the promise of getting the tax cuts or something in the second bill. You would be able, or you could do something the other way around, depending on your motivations. But that was a losing argument from Thune. So we'll see how they can keep these like really narrow majorities in the Senate and the House together to get these votes. It's not going to be easy at all. But once again, Trump is the factor that can get things across the line, because, I mean, we've seen this multiple times with nominations in the Senate. He's able to make that math work by threats. One thing that people have talked about is the America PAC that Elon Musk set up that was instrumental in Pennsylvania. That is a sword of Damocles, people have said, hanging over the head of Republicans that's been able to get them in line so far throughout this first month of Donald Trump's presidency, his second presidency. So we'll see what happens with these votes, but that's very, very powerful going forward.
All right, what I like about this show, I think, is if you made it through this segment, I think you have a pretty good idea of what's going on here in a pretty weird situation.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.